In the golden age of Hollywood, amidst the glitz and glamour of the silver screen, a star was born, Audrey Hepburn, a name synonymous with elegance, beauty, and timeless style. Yet beneath the surface of this cinematic goddess lay a labyrinth of secrets, controversies, and unsettling truths that would defy the public's perception of her. Audrey Hepburn was not just a pretty face, she was a complex enigma, a woman who navigated the treacherous waters of fame, love, and personal tragedy. Her life was a tapestry of contradictions, woven together by the threads of her choices, her relationships, and the era she lived in. An era that was as unforgiving as it was transformative. But let's rewind the clock a bit, back to a time when Audrey Hepburn was just another name, not yet etched into the annals of Hollywood history. The world was recovering from the ravages of World War II, and the United States was entering an age of prosperity. Hollywood was the dream factory, churning out icons and legends who would be immortalized in celluloid. Yet even in this land of dreams, not all that glitters is gold. Audrey Hepburn, born in Belgium to a British father and a Dutch mother, was a product of a world torn apart by war and political strife. Her early years were marked by hardships that would shape her character and fuel her ambitions. But what were these hardships? And how did they mold the woman who would become an international symbol of grace and beauty? As Audrey's star began to rise, so did the complexities of her life. Her relationships were a tangled web of love, betrayal, and hidden agendas. Men who claimed to love her, women who envied her, and an industry that both adored and exploited her. But who were these people, and what role did they play in the making and breaking of Audrey Hepburn? The Audrey Hepburn that the world came to know was a carefully crafted persona, a mask that hid the vulnerabilities, the fears, and the controversies that plagued her. She was more than just a Hollywood star. She was a woman who defied societal norms, who challenged the status quo, and who paid the price for her audacity. But as Audrey Hepburn's life unfolded, so did the mysteries that surrounded her, mysteries that would remain buried, only to resurface years after her untimely death. And as we delve into the enigmatic life of this Hollywood legend, we are left to ponder, what is the true cost of fame, and how well do we really know the icons we revere? So, let's embark on this journey, a journey that will take us behind the scenes of Hollywood's golden era, into the private life of Audrey Hepburn, and through the labyrinth of secrets that she took to her grave. But be warned, for the Audrey Hepburn you thought you knew may just be the tip of the iceberg, and what lies beneath could change your perception of her forever. Audrey Hepburn was born Audrey Kathleen Rustin on May 4, 1929, in Ixelles, Brussels, Belgium. Her father, Joseph Victor Anthony Rustin, was a British businessman, and her mother, Ella van Heemstra, was a Dutch baroness. On the surface, it seemed like Audrey was destined for a life of privilege and comfort. But destiny had other plans. The year was 1935, and Audrey's world was about to be shattered. Her father, a man she adored, walked out on the family. The abandonment by her father was a wound that never fully healed, a shadow that loomed large over her life. It was a betrayal that would shape her relationships with men, instilling in her a fear of abandonment that she would carry into her adult years. But the hardships didn't end there. In 1940, Germany invaded the Netherlands, and Audrey and her family found themselves living under Nazi occupation. The once idyllic landscapes of her childhood were now marred by the horrors of war. Food was scarce, freedom was a distant memory, and survival became a daily struggle. During these years, Audrey adopted the pseudonym Ella van Heemstra, modifying her name to evade suspicion as the name Hepburn sounded too English. She and her family were involved in the Dutch resistance, a dangerous endeavor that put their lives at risk. Audrey herself became a courier, delivering messages and packages for the resistance. It was a role that required immense courage, especially for a young girl of her age. But the war took its toll on Audrey, both physically and emotionally. Malnutrition left her with acute anemia, respiratory issues, and edema. She suffered, but she also persevered, finding solace in the arts, particularly ballet. Dance became her escape, a way to momentarily forget the world around her and lose herself in the movements and the music. As the war came to an end, Audrey and her family were among the fortunate ones to have survived, but the experiences left indelible scars. The war years were a crucible that shaped Audrey, molding her into a woman of resilience, strength, and an unyielding will to survive. Yet these were also the years that sowed the seeds of her insecurities, her vulnerabilities, and the darker aspects of her personality that she would spend a lifetime trying to reconcile. So, as the curtains rose on Audrey's life and the world began to take notice of this emerging star, one can't help but wonder, what were the hidden chapters of her life that remained concealed behind the facade of beauty and elegance? And how did these early experiences shape the woman who would captivate millions, yet remain an enigma even to those who thought they knew her best? The stage was set, the players were ready, and Audrey Hepburn was about to step into the limelight. But as she did, she carried with her the baggage of her past, a past that was filled with complexities and contradictions. And as we will soon discover, her rise to stardom was not just a fairy tale come true. It was a journey fraught with trials, tribulations, and a series of choices that would define her for better or worse. The war had ended, and Europe was in ruins, but amidst the rubble, a new world was taking shape. A world that was eager to forget the past and lose itself in the allure of cinema, fashion, and the promise of a brighter future. Audrey Hepburn, too, was eager to leave behind the traumas of her early years, and what better place to do that than the dream factory itself, Hollywood. Audrey's entry into the world of cinema was nothing short of serendipitous. A chance encounter with a casting director led to minor roles in European films, but it was her performance in the Broadway play Gigi that caught the eye of Hollywood producers. Soon she was cast in Roman Holiday opposite Gregory Peck, and the rest, as they say, is history. Roman Holiday was a blockbuster, and Audrey Hepburn became an overnight sensation. She won an Academy Award for her performance, a feat that catapulted her into the stratosphere of stardom. But this sudden fame came at a price that Audrey was only beginning to comprehend. The Hollywood machine is relentless, churning out stars and stories with mechanical efficiency, but it is also unforgiving. Audrey was now a commodity, her image carefully crafted to fit the mold of the quintessential Hollywood starlet. Her natural beauty was accentuated, her quirks ironed out, and her past sanitized for public consumption. But what the public didn't see was the toll this took on Audrey. The long working hours, the constant scrutiny, and the invasion of her privacy became a part of her daily life. She was no longer just Audrey, she was Audrey Hepburn, a brand that needed to be managed, marketed, and monetized. And then there were the sacrifices that Audrey had to make to sustain her newfound fame. Her marriage to actor Mel Ferrer was seen as a match made in heaven, but it was also a union that came under immense pressure due to their respective careers. Audrey had to navigate the complexities of being a wife, a mother, and a Hollywood icon, roles that often clashed and left her torn. But perhaps the most significant sacrifice was the loss of her anonymity. Audrey could no longer be just another face in the crowd. She was now a symbol, an ideal, and a fantasy that millions aspired to, but one that Audrey herself found increasingly suffocating. As Audrey's star continued to rise, so did the layers of her life that remained hidden from public view. Her relationships became a subject of tabloid fodder, her personal life dissected and analyzed for the world to see. But who were the men and women that played pivotal roles in Audrey's life? And what were the secrets, the controversies, and the untold stories that lay buried beneath the surface? Audrey Hepburn was living the dream, but it was a dream that had its own set of nightmares. Nightmares that Audrey kept locked away, hidden behind the radiant smile and the captivating eyes that the world had come to adore. And as we peel back the layers, we find a woman who was as complex as she was beautiful, a woman who was both a victim and a survivor in a world that was as cruel as it was enchanting. Audrey Hepburn was the epitome of grace and beauty, a woman who seemed to float rather than walk, who spoke in soft, measured tones, and whose eyes held the promise of untold stories. But those eyes also hid secrets that were intricately tied to the men who came in and out of her life. Her first marriage to Mel Ferrer was, to the outside world, a fairy tale union. Two beautiful people, madly in love, bound together in matrimony. But behind closed doors, the marriage was fraught with tension, insecurities, and the constant pressure of public scrutiny. Mel Ferrer was often seen as the controlling force in Audrey's life, a man who managed her career but also dominated her personal life. The marriage eventually ended in divorce, but not before leaving its mark on Audrey. Then came Andrea Dotti, an Italian psychiatrist who swept Audrey off her feet. They married and had a son, but the marriage was far from stable. Dotti was a serial philanderer, and the relationship was marred by his numerous affairs. Audrey, ever the optimist, tried to make the marriage work, but the emotional toll was too high. The marriage ended, but the experience left Audrey jaded, questioning her own worth and the idea of love itself. But it wasn't just romantic relationships that shaped Audrey. It was also her friendships and professional partnerships. Her on-screen chemistry with actors like Gregory Peck and Cary Grant was legendary, but off-screen, these relationships were complex, tinged with rumors and speculations. Was Audrey just a co-star, a friend, or something more? The lines were often blurred, adding another layer of complexity to her already complicated life. And then there were the rumors, the whispers that floated around Hollywood circles, whispers about Audrey's close friendship with her Breakfast at Tiffany's co-star George Peppard and her tumultuous relationship with My Fair Lady co-star Rex Harrison. Each relationship added a new facet to Audrey's persona, but also a new set of challenges, controversies, and emotional upheavals. As Audrey navigated the labyrinth of her relationships, she also grappled with her own insecurities, her fear of abandonment, and her quest for true love. A quest that seemed increasingly elusive as she moved from one relationship to another, each leaving its own set of scars and lessons. But who were the men that truly knew Audrey Hepburn? What were the relationships that defined her, the loves that inspired her, and the betrayals that broke her? As we delve deeper into this aspect of her life, we find a woman who was as vulnerable as she was strong, as flawed as she was perfect, and as human as she was divine. Audrey Hepburn may have been a global icon, but she was also a woman in search of love, meaning, and a sense of belonging. A search that took her to the heights of stardom, but also to the depths of despair. And as we pull back the curtain on this chapter of her life, we are left to wonder, what are the hidden costs of love and fame? And how do they shape the person we become? The world knew Audrey Hepburn as a fashion icon, a Hollywood star, and a symbol of elegance. But there was another side to Audrey, a side that was far removed from the glitz and glamour of Tinseltown. Audrey Hepburn, the humanitarian, was a woman on a mission to make the world a better place. But even this noble endeavor was not without its complexities and controversies. In 1988, Audrey became a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. It was a role that took her to some of the most impoverished and war-torn regions of the world. From Ethiopia to Bangladesh, from Vietnam to Venezuela, Audrey was on the front lines, advocating for children's rights, education, and health care. She was no longer just a pretty face on a movie poster. She was a beacon of hope for millions of children who had been dealt a cruel hand by fate. But why did Audrey, a woman who had achieved so much, feel the need to venture into the complex and often thankless world of humanitarian work? The answer lies in her own experiences, her own struggles, and her own quest for meaning. Audrey had seen the horrors of war firsthand, had felt the pangs of hunger, and had known the fear of uncertainty. Her work with UNICEF was not just philanthropy. It was a deeply personal endeavor, a way to come full circle and give back to a world that had given her so much. However, Audrey's humanitarian efforts were not without their share of controversies. Critics questioned her role, labeling it as celebrity activism and accusing her of using her fame to gloss over the complexities of global issues. Some even went so far as to question the efficacy of her work, pointing to the systemic issues that plagued the regions she visited and arguing that her involvement was merely a drop in the ocean. But Audrey was undeterred. She used her fame as a platform, leveraging her global appeal to bring attention to issues that were often ignored or sidelined. She may not have had the solutions to the world's problems, but she had something far more powerful, the ability to shine a spotlight on them, to make people care, and to inspire action. Yet, as Audrey immersed herself in this new role, she also had to confront her own mortality. She was diagnosed with a rare form of abdominal cancer, a diagnosis that she kept private, choosing to focus on her work rather than her illness. But as her health deteriorated, so did her ability to travel, to advocate, and to be the force of nature that she had always been. Audrey Hepburn, the humanitarian, was a woman of contradictions. She was both celebrated and criticized, both effective and limited, both strong and vulnerable. But through it all, she remained committed to her cause, to the belief that she could make a difference, no matter how small. But was Audrey Hepburn's humanitarian work a genuine effort to bring about change, or was it a well-intentioned but ultimately futile endeavor? And how does this aspect of her life shape our understanding of who she was, not just as a public figure, but as a human being? Audrey Hepburn may have left the world stage, but her legacy continues to resonate, both in the hearts of her fans and in the lives of the children she sought to help. And as we explore this facet of her life, we find a woman who was as complex in her altruism as she was in her art, a woman who defied easy categorization and who continues to inspire even in her absence. As the 1990s dawned, Audrey Hepburn found herself at a crossroads. She had achieved fame, fortune, and adoration from millions around the globe. She had also made a significant impact through her humanitarian work. Yet, the final chapter of her life was one that she chose to live largely away from the public eye, in the quietude of her home in Switzerland. But even in these seemingly peaceful years, Audrey's life was far from simple. Audrey was battling appendiceal cancer, a rare form of the disease that she had chosen to keep private. She underwent surgeries and treatments, but the illness was relentless. Despite her deteriorating health, Audrey continued to be involved in UNICEF work, even planning future missions. It was as if she was racing against time, trying to fit a lifetime of work into a rapidly closing window. But Audrey's final years were not just about her battle with cancer or her humanitarian efforts. They were also about reconciling with her past, her relationships, and her own complex persona. She spent time with her sons, Sean and Luca, and found companionship in Robert Wolders, a Dutch actor who became her partner in the last years of her life. It was a period of introspection, of looking back at a life that had been as tumultuous as it had been extraordinary. Audrey Hepburn passed away on January 20th, 1993, at the age of 63. The world mourned the loss of an icon, but the controversies and complexities that had marked her life did not end with her passing. Questions about her wartime activities resurfaced, her relationships became the subject of biographies and documentaries, and her humanitarian work was scrutinized and debated. Even in death, Audrey remained an enigma, a woman who had lived her life on her own terms, but had also been shaped by the circumstances and the people around her. She left behind a legacy that was as multifaceted as the roles she had played, both on screen and off. As we come to the end of Audrey Hepburn's story, we are left with more questions than answers. How do we reconcile the different aspects of her life, from the Hollywood star to the devoted mother, from the fashion icon to the humanitarian? How do we make sense of the contradictions that defined her, the highs and lows that shaped her, and the choices that made her who she was? Audrey Hepburn was a woman of many layers, some darker than you'd ever imagine. She was both a product of her times and a timeless beauty, both a public figure and a private individual, both a dream and a reality. And as we close this chapter, we leave you with a question. How well do you really know your heroes? Audrey Hepburn's life was a tapestry of light and shadow, of triumphs and tragedies, of love and loss. And as we step back to admire this intricate tapestry, we realize that it is not just a portrait of a woman, but a reflection of us all, a mirror that holds up the complexities, the contradictions, and the eternal mysteries that make us human. Audrey Hepburn was a paradox, a woman who defied easy categorization. She was a Hollywood starlet who shunned the trappings of fame, a fashion icon who cared more for substance than style, a loving mother who struggled with relationships, and a humanitarian who faced criticism for her noblest efforts. Her life was a series of contrasts and contradictions, a journey that took her from the dark alleys of war-torn Europe to the glittering stages of Hollywood, from the impoverished villages of Africa to the tranquil serenity of her Swiss home. As we've explored the various facets of Audrey's life, we've encountered a woman who was as complex as she was captivating, a woman who faced unimaginable hardships but never lost her grace, who achieved unparalleled success but never lost her humility, who loved deeply but often found herself entangled in complicated relationships. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Audrey Hepburn's life was her constant search for meaning, a search that led her down many paths, some filled with light and others shrouded in darkness. It was this quest for meaning that drove her to give back to the world, to use her fame as a platform for change, and to leave behind a legacy that was as nuanced as it was impactful. So, as we conclude this exploration of Audrey Hepburn's life, we are left with a lingering question. How well do we really know the icons we admire? How well do we understand the complexities that shape them, the experiences that define them, and the legacies that immortalize them? Audrey Hepburn was more than just a pretty face. She was a woman of substance, a woman of conviction, a woman of paradoxes. And as we ponder the enigma that was Audrey, we are reminded of the beauty of complexity, the allure of mystery, and the eternal fascination of the human spirit. In the end, Audrey Hepburn remains an icon, not just of beauty or fashion, but of resilience, compassion, and complexity, a woman who lived her life with purpose, who faced her challenges with courage, and who left the world a better place than she found it. And as we turn the final page of this story, we realize that Audrey Hepburn's greatest legacy is not in the roles she played or the causes she championed, but in the questions she leaves behind. Questions that challenge us to look beyond the surface, to delve deeper into the complexities of life, and to find our own meaning in a world filled with contradictions. And so, we are left to ponder, how well do we really know our heroes, and how well do we know ourselves? For in the story of Audrey Hepburn, we find not just a biography of an icon, but a reflection of our own complexities, our own struggles, and our own eternal quest for meaning.